Great.
Good afternoon. My name is Marley Stovin. I'm an intern for National Sports Media Association. Today, I am joined by Brian McLaughlin. Brian, how are you?
I'm doing great, Marley. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for joining. So, my first question is, what got you into sports broadcasting?
Oh, geez. Probably somewhat of a long story. The short answer would be I was a mediocre high school athlete who realized I wasn't going to be able to keep playing baseball, soccer, and basketball and wanted to figure out how to stay involved in just working in sports. And kind of thought that journalism in some shape or form might be something cool to study. Explored that, thought that might be what I wanted to kind of look at when I went to school. And then when I went to college, I went to Penn State, just got involved in the student radio station and kind of fell in love from there. Got to do a lot of great practice and learned a lot at school. And then probably about my sophomore, junior year, I really kind of realized that play-by-play specifically was something that I was really interested in and really passionate about. So kind of just followed my gut instincts from there, and have been fortunate to make a decent career out of it so far.
Awesome. So, you mentioned you went to Penn State. What other experiences do you think shaped your path to get you where you are now?
Definitely internships. I've been so fortunate to work for some great organizations. I remember my very first internship when I was in school was a summer media relations internship with the Altoona Curve. Trey Wilson, who's now the play-by-play and director of communications for the Richmond Flying Squirrels, was my boss. That was just an outstanding kind of first step into working in professional sports, and then getting to call games for the Kalamazoo Growlers and the Northwoods League, and then the Yarmouth Dennis Red Sox and the Cape Cod League were both such formative experiences from a broadcast standpoint. Just being on the microphone every day, learning from my coworkers. Really felt like those were periods in my broadcast career where I took kind of the biggest leaps as far as just my own skill set, and kind of really learned what it takes to be a broadcaster on a day-to-day basis. And then I would say even still, I'm learning professionally and getting great experiences here where I live in Vermont. And so feel like I'm still kind of acquiring those kind of those experiences every time I try to put on the headset. Still kind of taking those in, I'd say.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. What was your first experience behind the microphone?
First experience. I think the first game I ever called was just into a tape recorder of a state college high school soccer game. It was kind of the initial steps at our student radio station, Com Radio at Penn State, to just kind of feel out who's interested in this, who's going to take it seriously, who's somebody that might do a little prep work beforehand. I probably did the bare minimum at that stage, but that would have been kind of the first time I ever got to try out what it sounds like, what it feels like to do a play-by-play broadcast. And then from there, just those student radio experiences at Penn State were so massive. I was calling Penn State women's ice hockey, Penn State softball, some Penn State baseball, all as an 18-year-old, just as a freshman at Penn State. So just getting thrust into those positions, my very first year there at school. I can't even imagine where I would be if I didn't get those experiences right away. And so that absolutely are things I think about fondly. And as long as you don't make me listen back to those broadcasts, because those would probably be pretty terrible to listen to.
Well, it sounds like you've had a lot of experience since then. Um, so you mentioned a couple of sports. Nowadays, do you say that you're more focused on one sport specifically or multiple still?
Multiple still. I'm very fortunate in my career that I'm relied on to call a variety of sports. It's one of, I think, a skill set that I really bring to the table where I live now in Vermont. Recently, I've gotten to do some golf broadcast work down in Florida, which is a new experience for me, but almost too many sports to name. I like to joke with people that if you just have a sport you want me to call and are willing to pay me, I'll be there. So from baseball and softball, lacrosse in the spring, lacrosse is a sport that I'd never called before until I moved up here. Same with field hockey. I've gotten to experience those. Ice hockey is something I've gotten to do more of in Vermont. I love calling football, even though I don't get to do a ton of football work these days, but still every now and then I get on some high school football. But then kind of the sports that are my bread and butter these days are soccer and basketball are the two that I do the most of. And I would say probably I'm maybe most well known for in this area. I'm the radio voice of the Vermont men's basketball team, and then between work for Vermont soccer, men's and women's, and then Vermont Green FC is our USL2 summer team here in Vermont that are the reigning national champions. I get to do their home games as well. So soccer and basketball are probably my two main sports these days, from just as far as what people watch and listen to. But it is, I'll call just about anything. And I feel like it's something that I'm really careful about and care a lot about, is being able to be somebody who can step into just about any broadcast booth, regardless of the sport, and hopefully bring a professional level and a professional style to the call.
Yeah, that's really impressive. So soccer and basketball are your like the ones you do the most, but what's your favorite sport to cover?
Oh, it's so hard. It's a great question. The kind of the cliche answer is whatever's in season. So whatever I'm calling at that moment, I get super into. I grew up a diehard baseball fan, so there's something special in my heart about calling baseball, and something that is still just like kind of almost romantic about it to me. Just that old school feel. I'm keeping score by hand. There's something great about being at the ballpark every summer. But the team that these days I'm closest with is basketball. And there's something about that energy of basketball, the way it can change momentum, just in a moment's notice. You just never know what's going to happen from tip off to the end of the 40-minute game. So it has definitely become a sport that I feel I probably do best. And so I think I'd have to say that it's become a favorite of mine.
Awesome. Baseball is definitely my favorite, but I'm sure basketball, the energy
Nice.
is a lot of fun.
Yeah,
What?
definitely. It's just so different.
It is, yes, very different paces. What is one moment in your career that you think stands out now, or like your most memorable game that you've covered?
I have been fortunate to now broadcast three NCAA tournament games with the Vermont basketball team. It's hard to separate the three of them. The very first one I did was against Arkansas in the NCAA tournament. That game came down to the buzzer. Arkansas ended up winning by three. And then year two, I got the chance to call Vermont against Marquette in the NCAA tournament. And then the most recent one was a couple years ago now, when Vermont played Duke in the first round of the tournament. Kyle Filipowski was on that Duke team. It's really hard not to say that game is Duke. In New York City, we played in Brooklyn, got to stay across the street from Madison Square Garden. Just everything about that week. Um, was truly incredible. And I've been so fortunate that the team has been very successful when I've been here. So getting to call games for a winning team is always just a treat. But those NCAA tournament games, they definitely jump to mind.
Yeah, that's awesome. That sounds like a lot of fun. Uh,
Yeah.
Sports media, as we know, it has changed a lot with social media and streaming and more. How do you think that impacts the way that you approach your role now in 2026?
Yeah, that's something that I try to think about a good bit. I definitely have changed how I use social media, which then I think impacts how I approach it in a lot of ways. And so it's also dependent on what team you're working for and who that audience is. Something I try to think about in every broadcast is consider the audience. What does the audience need from me today? So that's from a very basic standpoint. Radio versus TV are completely different mindsets. With the soccer team I work for, we have a massive social media following, at least by Vermont standards. Maybe not for some of the state winners here, but for Vermont standards, they have close to 20,000 Instagram followers, and they're a 4-year-old team. And so they are a team that has really done a good job building their brand via social media. So a lot of our broadcasts are discussing how that's happened, how they have become so relatable in the community. And then I try my best to interact with a very online fan base because they're so popular online and throughout the internet. People are watching worldwide, and we're available on YouTube. And so I ask often during those streams, where are you tuning in from? And I have the YouTube comments up on my phone during those games to try to see what people are saying. Some games people are like, your audio's too loud. And I'm like, all right, we're going to turn down the audio a little bit. Other games, it's people telling me they're tuning in from England to watch. They're family members from the west coast of Canada who watch our streams all the time, family members of players on the team. So really trying to be focused on that audience and that audience interaction throughout those games. It's a little different than my Vermont men's basketball games. Our audience is a lot of old retired folks in Vermont, which I love, and those people are great because they still listen to the radio. Not many people are listening to the radio these days, but I know I have loyal radio listeners that are at home, not watching the game on ESPN Plus. They're just listening to me. So I really take a big kind of amount of pride in providing that for them. So it's not changed as much in some ways as far as like web streaming and certainly TikTok and Instagram and how highlights are utilized is something I think about. And from sharing my work and where those highlights go, I think it is an important part of just everything we do. But to me, it's about how are people consuming these broadcasts, especially because so much of what I do is consumed online. It's not consumed via linear TV. It's not consumed via kind of your classic ways to watch or listen to sports. So I know my audience is watching on their phone, watching on their computer, watching on their tablet. And so I try to just keep that in mind throughout my work.
Awesome. Thank you for that. You've already shared a lot of insight for someone like me, but what kind of information would you provide to others who are trying to break into sports media, or what advice would you give them for a current day by day now?
Mm. Something that a mentor of mine told me that um, I think is just important for you to have in the back of your mind is expect excellence. Expect excellence in yourself every day. And that doesn't mean strive, it doesn't mean you need perfection. Perfection is something we're always chasing, though. There is no such thing as the perfect broadcast, no such thing as the perfect sideline hit, no such thing as the perfect sportscast. But we can try to chase that and we can strive for that. And so having the expectation of excellence for yourself, I think just it internally raises your own level without even realizing it. And that's not to say you should be putting pressure on yourself. That should not be the message. You should be having fun. You should be trying to enjoy yourself because the more you can do that in whatever area of sports media you're going to be in, that shows through. And so I think that that's the balance you have to try to find is both having high expectations for yourself while also recognizing that you're not always going to get there, but the larger goals you set, the more likely you are to get close to them. So that's something that I really think has helped me elevate myself professionally. And then I would tell you, and I tell this to people in non-sports industries, in non-broadcast industries, being a player, being a teammate who is somebody who people enjoy being around, somebody that they can rely on, being somebody that is willing to just sacrifice for the good of your group, the good of your team. Something we all probably heard playing sports growing up, but I think if we can take that mentality into our day-to-day lives, just somebody that your coworkers enjoy being around. You will be somebody that then is thought of when a hiring director calls. You'll be somebody that is recommended to other positions. You'll be somebody that is thought of for more roles. It's a big part of how I've built my work here in Vermont is just by showing up every day, being reliable, being consistent, being somebody who brings positivity to a daily basis, tries to be a problem solver. And through there, then I've been able to build a great network of people here in Vermont that have wanted me to call their games. And so I think that's as important, if not more important, than the talent you bring to the table, which is something we can work on. We can work on our skill set. We can work on those things that make us great broadcasters. But if you can just be a great person, then you're going to be somebody that is so much more desirable in the job market. So try to keep that in mind every day and whatever you do in this internship. That's something that you can do is be somebody that your coworkers enjoy working with. Be somebody that your boss can rely on. And then your talent, your skill set, everything else that makes you special will only help you shine even more.
I think that's great advice. Well, thank you so much. I
Thank you.
don't have any more questions, but you've provided a lot of insight and answered them very well. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
I don't think so,
I'll
Marley.
have
I appreciate you
to.
asking good questions. That's good stuff. I'm glad to get to sit down and get to know you a little bit. Where do you go to school?
I go to Tennessee.